Thank you very much, everybody. And we're very happy to be here with you. I'm Dina Roginski from the Hebrew program, and together with me is my dear colleague and friend, Sar Abel Ani from the Arabic program. We're both at the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations at Yale, NELC department. The topic of our talk is Languages in Dialogue, New Paradigm for Language Instruction. This project is about teaching the two Semitic languages, Arabic and Hebrew, side by side in some initial form. This is a pioneering model of language instruction in dialogue, and we hope this could be a first step towards new pedagogy in language instruction in higher education in general. We would like, with giving some thanks and acknowledgement to many people who supported us in our program, in our project. It was a complex project, and there were many players, institutional players, colleagues, and of course ourselves collaborating with one another. So we would like to thank the NELC department and the chair, who was highly supportive. We would like to thank our colleagues from both the Hebrew and the Arabic program at NELC, and we'd like to thank the Center for Middle Eastern Studies for supporting us with Title VI funding, and the Yale Center for Language Study for pedagogical guidance and support, ongoing support. Next slide, please. So our project has a pedagogical and theoretical rationale, which is both linguistic and social and cultural. So two factors come into play. The first factor, the linguistic factor, is that students who already have an advanced background in one of the Semitic languages will find it much easier to start a learning of the foundations of the other language by comparing and by focusing on the similarities between the two languages. So this is the first linguistic component. Secondly, the social and cultural component of this course is a high and unique asset that has been put together. So the main pedagogical uniqueness of the course lies in its innovative nature in two ways. First, we're putting these two languages side by side, and as a first exposure to the other Semitic language. Secondly, we put the speakers of the two languages side by side in one classroom. This class started off in pre-pandemic era, so our students are actually sitting side by side at one table as we started this class last year. Next slide, please. What do the students see when they go to the Yale catalog, and maybe they're intrigued by the title of the course and they want to see what it means? So the description goes as following. Arabic and Hebrew are closely related as sister Semitic languages. They have a great degree of grammatical, morphological, and lexical similarity. Hebrew and Arabic have been in cultural contact in various places and in different aspects. These advanced language classes explore linguistic similarities between the two languages, as well as parallel current cultural aspect between the communities. And the goal is also outlined. Students benefit from regular meetings with the other class in which similar topics are discussed. The shared meetings enable learners of both languages to participate together in one class to bring to light the similarities between the two sister languages and to explore key social issues based on mutual respect while focusing on cultural and linguistic aspects of the material. Credit. What do the students get in terms of language credit? So the students get advanced third year level 5 language credit for their core language, which means our students will get a credit for advanced Arabic class. My students will get credit for advanced Hebrew class, and the exposure to the other Semitic language is just a very low-key, fun, basic exposure and exploration. So there's no risk involved, but it is actually a bonus that our class is offering to these students. Next slide, please. And we want to share the evolution of the project. It was really a complex project in many ways, pedagogically, conceptually, administratively. And it took a long time to put all of this together. It started off way back in 2016 or even earlier when Sarab and myself were having lunches together, enjoying the fun of the languages and the comparison and the pedagogical ideas we had. And we just felt that there's a lot of similarities, and we enjoyed and we wanted to share that that joy with our students, and we started to think, how can we share this joy? How can we put these languages side by side? What can be the practice or the pedagogy that can be put together? In 2017, we introduced the basic idea to our department, NELC curriculum committee chair, and the Hebrew and Arabic programs together approval. We got their approval, but then we started to think, how can we do that actually in action? We've been reaching out to many colleagues that we have both at Yale and beyond, so in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Israel, teachers, pedagogues who teach Hebrew, who teach Arabic, to give some advice, consultation, feedback. We were not able to get, there was no other initiative of this kind, so we couldn't get a model, so we had to create a model. In 2019, we were very lucky to get fellowship at the Center for Language Studies at Yale to support our thinking, our outline for the course and the design for the course. And last year, 2020, last spring, we offered the class for the first time. We started off in pre-pandemic era. We were sitting together in one class, but then in March, we moved on to Zoom remote class.
And as Dina was saying, during our research, we did not find any model that combined both Arabic and Hebrew. However, we did find this model in the article whose title you can see here, where the two classes of French and German were sometimes put together, that's to say 3 times for the semester. This joining of the two classes was not really focusing on the target language of each individual class. However, in those 3 meetings, the classes would talk about shared cultural or social issues that would be relevant to both communities and matters that they have studied previously. So this was, we found that this was a good model, but what we wanted to do is kind of use it, but also, work to develop it. This is what the weekly plan of the 2 classes look like. So basically, as Dina said, we are having 2 parallel advanced classes running side by side. Each of those 2 classes meet twice a week for 75 minutes. Those meetings and the content and the discussions that are going on are completely in the target language, as those are 2 advanced courses. And then on Fridays, the 2 classes actually sit together. Yes, this was pre-pandemic. So they're in one room and they would actually sit together to discuss common cultural, social, political, or art issues that the 2 classes had studied parallelly in their classes. And the main language of the discussion was English, although, of course, the 2 languages would play in hand. In addition to that, we had a shared vocabulary list. Those vocabulary lists contained words that are similar between the 2 languages, similar in terms of the roots that they share, similar in terms of the pronunciation and also in meaning. And of course, those were introduced as well. And just as Dina mentioned, no high pressure was put on the students to learn these words, rather an exposure. In addition to that, students were highly encouraged to work in pairs, or were paired together in pairs from the 2 languages to work together on the workbook. Which brings us to the next book, are the books that we used when designing the class. The first one that you can see here, the Arabic and Hebrew Lexicon, is a book that Dina and I heavily used when we were putting together the vocab list that I just mentioned. In addition to that, we have our Dreams of Peace book, which is basically a book that is designed to teach Arabic and Hebrew to people who already had a background of one language or the other. And basically what it tried to do is it used people's knowledge of one language to help them learn the other, where the similar sounds, the similar words were introduced, and they were introduced side by side in 2 languages. It was easy for students and for learners to see the 2 words, what they mean, how they can be written, how they can be pronounced, and thus aiding them in the process of learning.
Our next topic is, how did we choose the themes, the weekly themes? So we started off from a lexical similarity, as Sarab described. We used the lexicon, and we looked for parallel words, for parallel expression, parallel fields, and we have found many parallelism in vocab that's related to food, related to family members, to religion, to body parts, to days of the week, to numbers, and so on. So our basic idea was to take this parallelism and to put it into content. And we've created cultural content based on these topics, as we will show you in a minute. So there was vocab, there was cultural content, and then the Friday section, as I've described, was actually trilingual class. The English mediates both the Hebrew and the Arabic exposure to the basic vocab and ideas. And next slide shows you one of the first lists. We used pronouns. The pronouns are translated in both transliterated in both languages. You can easily see that they are very, very similar. It's almost intuitive for somebody who knows one of the languages to guess and to understand from the other language. So this is a model of a sheet that we gave on the Fridays to assist the students in their dialogue. The first topic was cultural manners, customs, and greetings. We used the Friday section in order to introduce basic greetings, basic dialogue like hello, how are you, good morning, blessed morning, where are you from? All these very basic words or dialogue actually has some parallelism in the two languages, so it was a nice intro to the whole class. Another topic of interest that is built off the vocab, as I mentioned, was the body parts. So on the body parts, we built the cultural content of body space, gestures, body language that's relevant to each of the languages, and put them in comparison. And you see some example of social space, of hand usage, of gender space, and so on. Another topic of interest, of course, the comparison between food and dietary restrictions between kosher and halal for both cultures, and there are similarities, there are also differences. We've discussed it as a content in our classes, and then on the Friday we will have an example of a bilingual material. The clip here is in Arabic, explaining in Arabic the kashrut laws of Judaism, but it's subtitled in Hebrew, so both classes could benefit from looking at the same clip and understanding.
And one of the topics that was also dealt with is the Israeli-Palestinian identity. And from the support that we got and from the funding, we were able to host a number of events. This is one of them, where we hosted Ibrahim Niari, and he himself is an Israeli-Palestinian. He lives in the United States, and he does a stand-up comedy show that centralizes around his identity as Israeli-Palestinian. We were fortunate enough to be able to host him where he presented his show in the evening. Students of the Arabic and the Hebrew course had to go and attend this show in the evening, as well as other Yale students who might be interested. And the very next day, which happened to be a Friday, we hosted Ibrahim in our joint class. This is the joint class, as you can see, where this visit was really interesting because students of advanced Arabic would ask Ibrahim questions in Arabic, and then he would reply in Arabic. And then he would translate his reply to English for everyone to understand. And then student of Hebrew would ask him questions in Hebrew. He would reply in Hebrew and then translate into English so that everyone would be able to understand. This interaction was really interesting, seeing the way all three languages were playing a role and how students were able to communicate and understand one language to the other. We were also so fortunate that this particular visit was featured by the Yale News. And in the session handout that I have provided for you, there is a link for the article if you wish to visit it and read a little bit more about it. Another part of the themes, and I want to stress here that these are not all of the themes that were included in the classes, but we're just trying to give you a highlight of some of the themes that we included. So gender relations was one of the themes that was included, specifically the Me Too movement that was very high in the area in both context. Traditions, festivities, and holidays were also introduced as far as the Hebrew side is concerned. For instance, the Jewish Moroccans festivities of Memuna were introduced. Music, of course, cannot be excluded out of the theme. Shared the topic about the importance of music in both societies. And one song that we used during our Friday meeting is this famous song of Abdul Hamid al-Mansoura, where the band sings the same song in the traditional melody, but using two languages. We also were planning to host Karim Nagy. For those of you who teach Arabic, you're probably familiar with him. His works concentrate around Arabic music and folk dance, and he gives students workshops and performances. We were supposed to host him in April. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and we went to teach remotely, and all events were canceled until further notice.
Another topic of great interest was calligraphy, art and language in both cultures. As we all know, Arabic has a very rich and old calligraphy tradition of calligraphy. Hebrew also has some calligraphic manifestations. We're very lucky to take the students to our Yale Beinecke library to see collections of both Hebrew and Arabic calligraphy. You see in the Hebrew side, you see ketubah, the Jewish marriage contract that is decorated and has some Hebrew calligraphy. And at the bottom, you see our combined class, all our students, the two instructors, and the librarian in their field trip to the Beinecke collection. Here's another very interesting event that we hosted. It's called Aravrit. Aravrit is a combined font of Arabic and Hebrew put together one on top of the other, created by the artist Liron Lavi Turkenich. We're very lucky to have Liron over, coming to Yale, giving a lecture to the whole Yale community, and of course to our students. And the next day she was a guest in our class, and she had an actual workshop, hands-on workshop, in which she introduced how to put the letters together, how to put the languages together. You see one of the students here holding his creation of the word Yale, both in Hebrew and Arabic put together. And let me just very briefly explain the logic of the new font. It is, Liron figured out and read about research about when you have Arabic speakers read their language, they can be introduced only to the upper part of the word in order to be able to recognize it. When you introduce Hebrew speakers to Hebrew, they just need the lower part of the word in order to be able to recognize it. Put together, it was combined beautifully, Arabic at the top, Hebrew at the bottom. So the upper word is actually language, safa, lura. The bottom word is home or house, bait, again put together in a beautiful artistic composition.
Finally, or before we close up, we have some conclusions and some recommendations. So as far as the Arabic side is concerned, of course, this is an advanced course in Arabic, and the main medium of text and interaction is Modern Standard Arabic. And for our attendees who have taught Modern Standard Arabic, you know that in our classes Modern Standard Arabic, what we try to do, this is something that I personally try to do, is try to cover different Arabic countries, due to the fact that Modern Standard Arabic is actually a form that is shared by all Arabic-speaking countries. For this particular class, I found out that perhaps it is advisable to try to focus on these themes, but in the Levant area, perhaps, rather than trying to include aspects of different Arab countries, which might overwhelm the class from a context point of view.
And I could add that what we found at the end of the class, what the students enjoyed most, or what was most beneficial from them. So when Sarab and myself planned the class, we thought that, you know, the lexical similarity is something that we should, you know, rely on and start off with. And we did, and it was the lists were good, but they are not sufficient. So the students actually enjoyed more the actual, you know, coming together, talking in English to one another, just getting to know one another, to talk about the topics that were discussed during the week, again in English, but to one another. And the lists or the workbook that we introduced previously was used in kind of a lower capacity. They were more engaged in the other aspects of the course, like cultural, social, and the events. And some of the students were very eager about the linguistic part as well, but maybe the majority enjoyed more the other parts. So it is for us, of course, an important important feedback, and this is a first ever, course put in such way. So there's a lot to learn and to think through as we plan ahead for the future classes.
Thank you so much. And we are looking forward to your questions at the very end of our session.
Thank you very much. The timing was perfect. It was just 20 minutes, so wonderful, yes. So I'm pleased to introduce the third presentation. It is titled Harnessing Open Educational Resources to Promote Intercultural Communication Competence. It is presented by Professor Janet Akkor. Dr. Janet Akkor coordinates the Turkish Studies program in the Department of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas at Austin and teaches a variety of courses in language, literature, film, and cultural studies. Her Turkish textbook, Her Şey Bir Merhaba ile Başlar, accompanying public Canvas course and YouTube channel comprise a media-rich open educational resources and is newly published by the Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning. Her current literary research explores the relationships between perpetrators and victims of political violence portrayed in transnational novels by Turkish and Iraqi Kurdish writers in exile. I'm going to share with you a link to some of the open educational resources that Professor Akkor wanted me to share with you in the chat function. Please, the floor is yours, Janet.
Thank you, Nargis. Can everyone hear me and everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thank you for your patience, everyone. It's hard to be the third speaker. I'm sure everyone's getting a little tired by now. So Nargis referenced my recent publication, but I'm actually not going to go into a lot of detail about that particular publication. I'll share some of my experiences preparing it and give you a brief overview. But the resource is out there. The link is in the handout for anyone who would like to explore it further. It's open to the world. Instead, I want to talk a little more about open educational resources, why they're particularly important for small languages like Turkish, Persian, and Hebrew, and also for large languages, and how they can be sort of used or harnessed to promote intercultural communicative competence. And so I think ICC, intercultural communicative competence, is a little more familiar to everyone, but the ins and outs of open educational resources may be less familiar, so I will dwell a little more upon that. And I will begin, I'll assume zero knowledge, and begin with a short little video that's prepared by our Center for Educational Resources and Language Learning, CORAL.
Traditional language textbooks are limiting. With no way to customize them, teachers can feel stuck. We're here to tell you about open educational resources. An OER is any material shared by its creator that has a Creative Commons or other open license and is available at low to no cost. While traditional textbooks have a copyright, preventing you from making copies or modifications, OERs allow you to remix, revise, and reuse materials, creatively adapting your resources and sharing them with language teachers and classrooms all over the world. Come, explore this new pedagogical landscape and open up your resources and your classroom. Traditional.
Okay, I hope everyone was able to see that. So just to recap, the most important point is here in bold. Open educational resources are educational materials and resources offered freely and openly for anyone. For example, Canvas is great, but Canvas is actually limited to institutions that support Canvas, right? So I'm talking about something bigger. So they're open to anyone and available under a license that allows users to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute again under another open license. Some of the benefits, why do this? Why bother? It can be a long process of creation. I think the benefits are worth it. I think one of the biggest benefits right now that we see in this age when we're concerned about equity for students is open educational resources, which are free, increase the access to educational materials to a wider range of learners, and predominantly to those underserved by traditional educational opportunities. This movement is gaining ground in K through 12 and in universities. Obviously, if you're using open educational resources in your course or in your school district, this can help students and entire districts and educational institutions save money. It also provides really badly needed wider visibility for pedagogical work, especially in the smaller critical languages. Those of us who teach smaller languages know that it is pretty near impossible to publish teaching materials because everything runs on a for-profit model and no one can make a profit off of a Turkish book that sells 50 copies. So having things out on the web where everyone can reach it provides wider visibility. Then in turn, your colleagues are going to engage with that material, use it, tweak it, come up with different versions of it. They can repost it. And so this creates an impetus for professional development, for critical reflection on materials, and in the long run, a better pool of learning materials out there that's been shaped by people working off of each other's work. Because work is updated more quickly and can be reposted, redistributed more quickly, and because you may find versions of your work being made by people in different countries for different student audiences, eventually it's going to include more diverse perspectives and representation in those materials. This in turn, I think, is going to improve student performance and satisfaction. Students always want up-to-date materials. They want materials that speak to them. And with the open model, things can be turned around and updated a little faster. Finally, a lot of us have informal learners out there. A lot of us, get phone calls from adult learners in particular. There's nobody teaching Turkish, Persian, Hebrew where they live, and they're asking about online resources. How can I learn on my own? How can I learn with a tutor? Having these resources out there is a good way to attract informal learners, and this may even attract some into our actual classrooms and thus increase our student enrollments. Okay, the second piece is intercultural communicative competence. I don't want to assume that anybody knows what it is. It refers to the ability to interact effectively and appropriately with people from other language and cultural backgrounds. It develops as the result of intentional goal setting and self-reflection around language and culture, and involves attitudinal changes towards one's own and other cultures. It's essential for establishing effective, positive relationships across cultural boundaries as required in a global society. So, for example, in the case of identities, not just for when you go to the country, but also for when you're interacting with immigrant Turkish communities in the United States. Beyond the obvious benefit of improved communication in the target language, it's important to recognize and promote the value of language learning and developing skills and dispositions that are crucial to our own dynamic workforce and a productive life. And these include things like acting and speaking with an open, inquisitive mind, listening openly to new points of view, thinking flexibly and critically and with empathy in new situations, fostering a desire to find out what's beyond, what's below the surface of certain cultural practices and products, and promoting a willingness to interact with others from different cultures. And of course, these kinds of critical transformations should be happening within the context of language learning in our classrooms. So why this video? This is what I don't want intercultural proficiency to be in my classroom. It's a terrible video about, you're dating a Turkish man when, if I had watched this video as a student, I never, ever would have married my husband. So why use, now we'll put the two together, why use OER materials to promote ICC? I argue that discussing cultural differences or similarities on hand socio-cultural practices that are captured in authentic texts that are written for target cultural audiences is key to increasing learners' intercultural communicative competence. Nothing new, we all know this, but it's especially key at the intermediate and advanced levels, I would argue. You need more input. Online texts such as photographs, blogs, vlogs, news articles, archival documents, etc., can be mined for cultural content and scaffolded in creative pedagogical ways. And guided engagement with a variety of up-to-date OER materials can expand the learner's view and experience of the target language and culture far beyond that of the instructor's limited perspective and experience. So this is a picture from the website, the web page where my interactive media-rich textbook is located. And I'll just refer to it a little bit. So what have I learned? I've been working on this project for 4 years now. It's slowly coming to an end. I've learned that from the initial conception of open educational resources project to its completion, an open educator has to answer many, many questions. Which open media should I use? Should I employ only homegrown content, or should I incorporate various types of openly licensed texts and media? How should I organize my materials into a coherent whole? Even at the micro scale of just creating small OER-based lessons, the answer to these questions implicates something that's called open educational practices. And this is a term that refers to the many ways that educators create coherent materials and pedagogies based on open content and open technologies. And of these open educational practices, the two that I find most important in the development of an OER are how to find high quality open content. It's not as easy as you think. And how to adapt open content for the creation of user generation materials. So the most important knowledge that I gained early on was how to read and understand open licenses. Instructors new to the design of OER have to learn that the term open is related to two different meanings of the word free. Much of the work in OER development has been mirrored by earlier work in the free software movement that resulted in products such as the Linux operating system. In the free software movement, the two senses of the word free were neatly captured in the aphorism, free as in free beer versus free as in free speech. No one pays for free beer. That's why we like it, right? It's free in the sense of the Latin word gratis. Of course, there are many internet services that you can use without payment, such as watching videos on YouTube, reading articles on CNN, or looking at Flickr image galleries. The mere fact that no money is exchanged for those services, however, has absolutely no bearing on how the rights entailed with the use, has no bearing on the rights entailed with the use and the reuse of the content. While users may access the content, they do not necessarily possess the rights to reuse it. In fact, reuse and redistribution of much freely accessed content is prohibited, and this represents sort of an elephant in the room that's frequently ignored by instructors creating pedagogical materials for their courses. I think it's now become more of an issue since we're doing everything online. In contrast, the second sense of the word free, free as in free speech, is captured by the Spanish or the French word libre. This sense of the word is synonymous with the adjective open as commonly used in the open education movement. Open in this sense refers to one's rights. For example, by placing a work under an open license, the copyright holder can share the rights with the end users, such as the right to make derivatives of the original work. Materials under these licenses are considered open because the users are free to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute the content. And this bundle of rights is commonly referred to as the 5 R's. Open licenses such as Creative Commons licenses exist on a continuum of openness, depending on how many of the 5 Rs are shared with the end user. And so when you start incorporating texts, openly licensed texts and photographs and videos from other sources, you do have to make sure that the license you've chosen for your own work matches up with the materials that you're choosing. The devil is actually in the details. The second most important lesson I learned is that you have to be really flexible. You have to approach your OER project like going to the farmer's market. For those of you guys who go regularly to the farmer's market, you know that there is no guarantee you will find exactly what you're looking for. Maybe you want to make ratatouille and you get there and the tomatoes are awful, you know, but the eggplants and the peppers look great. So if that's the case, today you're going to cook with eggplants and peppers, right? Although I held fast to a number of pedagogical principles and goals when designing my work, many of my original content ideas sort of fell by the wayside as I really started exploring what was out there. And in the end, I originally had 10 short units on 10 different themes. And what I ended up with was 4 long in-depth units. Some of the principles that I did hold fast to included the ones listed here: foregrounding ICC, keeping the flipped classroom model and blended instruction design, which we use at my university, trying to include a huge variety of advanced level text types and discourse strategies to be practiced, and close attention to spiraling between the units, vocabulary and grammar spiraling. So just quickly, what is this project? Her şey bir merhaba ile başlar means everything begins with a hello. It's a set of openly licensed curricular materials designed to facilitate Turkish language learners' progression from intermediate mid to advanced mid proficiency level. It was designed for students at UT Austin, but now it's out there for everyone. It includes online and print-on-demand materials. The materials encourage learners to use language, as you can see in these objectives, to investigate, explain, and reflect on the relationship between contemporary Turks' socio-cultural practices, products, and their perceptions of 4 big areas. The first is family and family relations. Second is love and marriage, especially as reflected in film and folk literature. The third area is the natural environment, social activism. And the fourth is Turkish relationships to the arts, film, and politics. Yes. And I said that there are numerous platforms involved in this. There is thank you, Nargis. There is basically the main structure is through a media-rich, very large Google Doc, which can be downloaded in parts or in full. Various links within the work go to videos on YouTube or Vimeo, or homegrown videos that are housed on the YouTube channel. Things also link out to extra text that I was unable to get copyright permission for. And there's a parallel, oops, we will not show this video, no time. There is a parallel public Canvas course that should be finished by summertime, hopefully, that includes interactive listening, grammar, and vocabulary exercises. It all runs parallel to the book. And if I had 2 hours today, I don't. If I were able to do a big workshop, I would want to show you exactly how to do searches for images for openly education, for OERs, in image repositories like public domain images, mixed license content repositories like Flickr and Wikipedia Commons. excuse me. How to do more effective Google searches. So to avoid things like, instead of looking for a family in Turkey, you might end up with families of turkeys, how to avoid things like that. I would love to show you how to search for open content on YouTube and Vimeo. It can be done, and how to avoid pit traps of then realizing that you have something that was copyrighted or that contains small elements like copyrighted music. I would love to show you some genres that are particularly rich for openly licensed videos, such as vlogs, unboxing, room tours, do-it-yourself videos, and give you some tips on finding good web text. They're a little harder to find, web texts that are openly licensed, and tell you a little bit how to plan for dissemination of your project, which is also really important to think about from the beginning. But there's no time. So instead, I will just give a quick, brief overview. This is almost the last slide. If you're evaluating other openly resources materials that are out there, be they websites or texts or photos or whatever, you think about them in the same way that you think about any other material you're looking for, but there's a couple of added issues. First is the basic content issue. Is it what you want your students to learn or to cover? Then there's accessibility, linguistic accessibility. Can you scaffold it well to make it work for your classroom? How open is it? Does the license match what you need to do? Quality, has this open education resource ever been peer reviewed? Is it in any of the repositories? Can you read reviews from other instructors who teach courses like yours? Is there a third edition? Have errors been corrected or noted? Since it's so new in our Middle Eastern studies languages, this is kind of a moot point. And finally, the format. Does the material come in a format that your students can easily access? Say you're teaching in Zimbabwe, and it's really all formatted for laptop computers. Is there a version that'll work on your student's telephone or not? Can things be printed or purchased in print at a low cost, or is the print, the print version exorbitant? These are all things to think about. So back to our metaphor of the farmer's market. What if you put a lot of things together, but there's just some pieces missing and you can't find what you're looking for? I would give you a couple tips there and say, don't give up. If you found the perfect piece of material, but it's copyrighted, well, then write to the author or the photographer or the publisher or the newsletter, newspaper editor, and inquire, tell them about your project, inquire if they'd be willing to give you permission to use it in your project. If they say yes, then you get written consent and cite it in their work as having special permission to be shared. Another option is to link out to copyrighted material. That's generally not encouraged because it can involve problems for students with visual disabilities. The websites may not be as accessible as the work you've produced, but it's still an option. If you still can't find the right material, produce it yourself. But if you're using volunteers in an audio lab or a video lab, make sure that you get consent from them to have their voice and their likeness used in the materials produced. And that is it. Again, my handout has lots and lots of links to helpful modules, seminars, other kinds of resources related to open education, language learning, and ways to create materials. So thanks for your attention.